All right, I have a surprise for you, Joe Bulig.
Oh, fun. I love surprises.
You're going to find out about this the exact moment everybody else does in the chat. There you go. Click that link. Let me know what you see.
Oh, this is a problem. Why do you do these things to me? Okay.
What? Just tell the world what you see.
So Mike made an iPhone phone case for your iPhone that has none other than the Bookworm logo on the back of it.
Yes. So this isn't just iPhones, by the way. The Cotton Bureau allows you to take one of your current designs and turn it into an iPhone case. It's like a new product that they've launched.
Yeah.
And so I got the email about it. I was curious about it, went through the process, and had to change a few things, but basically it didn't take a whole lot of time. And there are cases for the iPhone 13 line, the iPhone 12 line. I'm assuming the iPhone 14 line will be coming shortly. And then the Galaxy S22. Those are the ones that I see at the top of my screen. And there are even different case types. So there's a tough MagSafe, a tough matte MagSafe, tough matte, slim matte. And then I don't think we have a clear option. And then you could choose a couple different colors. So I picked a couple that look good. And if you want to show your support for the internet's largest and best book club.
You didn't put the asterisks on it this time.
I didn't, because I feel we would be if Ali Abdaal had gotten the right link at the beginning.
It's true. It's true.
So
this is pretty slick.
Yeah, I don't have one of these yet. They don't support the iPhone 11, which I currently have. When I get a new phone, probably shortly, I will probably get one of these cases for it. I don't know if it's going to be my everyday one because I have no idea what these are actually like. I've never bought a Cotton Bureau phone case before, but they look pretty decent. And they're not that expensive. The MagSafe version, I've just opened up the page. I'm not sure what price it says there. It might be taking out like the discount because I'm the creator or whatever, but $28. So
for which one? Because I'm not logged in or anything here.
Okay, well, yeah, just what's the default price on that first one that you see?
So the tough MagSafe this is iPhone 13 Pro.
Okay.
That's $40. The tough matte MagSafe is $40. Tough and tough matte are both $37.
Okay, yeah. So there must be like a creator discount built in there, but the bottom line is like $40 is for if there really is a tough MagSafe case, which it sounds like it is.
Yeah.
Rich color polycarbonate shell with TPU liner. I don't know what a TPU liner is, but sounds impressive, and it has magnets in it. So
pretty cool.
There you go.
So here's a fun fact. Did you know that I run a naked iPhone?
I did see that when we visited you not too long ago.
I have the 13 Pro. I upgraded last year. And at one point, I talked about putting like a screen protector on it or putting a case on it of some sort. Then I forgot, and I never did it. And I've still not done anything about it. And I still have no scratches, no dings, nothing. Like, I'm pretty sure this, outside of like needing a clean, it's not too far off of just what it looked like when it came out of the box.
Sure.
That's how I roll. I don't know how, given how much construction and stuff that I do. I don't know how that works.
Yeah, I was going to say. Well, you are a fortunate soul, Joe Bulig, to have preserved the mint state of your iPhone. Everyone else who's a mere mortal like me buy a case for it, whether it's a bookworm case or not.
Oh, I don't know that I would say yes. I think I'm just lucky. I think that's all it comes down to.
Yep. I'll save you some heartache. Get a case for your phone.
Okay.
The larger point we glossed over, though, was that I noticed that you didn't have a case when we visited you. So we got to hang out in person. We got to record a podcast in person, but it wasn't Bookworm.
It was not.
So we recorded an episode of The Intentional Family titled Meet the Buligs. So Joe and his wife, Becky, were a guest on The Intentional Family podcast. I ran all the tech stuff. Rachel did the interview, but it published earlier this week as we record. So if you want to go listen to it, you can and you should. because there's some great stuff in there about how the Buligs are intentional in shaping and creating the type of family that they want to have. And I've told you this already, but there were several things that you did and said while we were with you that have got the wheels turning for my wife and I.
I will say, like, for those who listen to Bookworm, like it's kind of a fun sneak peek behind the scenes, I guess, of what you hear on Bookworm, I guess, because obviously my wife Becky was involved with that. She's actually the main speaker in that, I would say. So you get her perspective, which is unique, but at the same time, like it's definitely a different style, and it's definitely a different aspect of some of the same things we talk about here on Bookworm. But yeah, if you want to see like the intentionality that comes into even like purchasing a property and a house, I think we talked about that quite a bit. Like, why did we do that? And why do we have it set up the way that we do? And why do we eat every meal outside? And why is this weird and yet fun? So it's kind of a cool deal. So yeah, go check it out.
All right. So there'll be a link in the show notes, also a link in the chat for people who want to check that out. But thank you for doing that. That was really cool. And I know Rachel really enjoyed it. I was stressed out the whole time because I thought my microphone cable was dying, but it turned out pretty good.
I will say I've thrown 2 XLR cables in my backpack since we had that recording.
All right. So to follow up, did you figure out which mind map app you're going to use?
Yeah, I'm kind of torn and in the middle of 2 different ones, because what I quickly learned, Mike, so I've been doing some mind maps. I kind of covers my second action item here. One was to figure out an app. The second was to create a few of these. And I did that. I did probably half of them on a computer and maybe half of them on pen and paper, as you would expect, right? And I found that there are often times when I'm creating a mind map that definitely has a short time span. Do you do this where, like, I know that I've got to put together, take this Sunday, for example, I got a big outdoor event again, and I've got to collect a whole bunch of different aspects of that. And instead of me doing that on a digital app, I did it on pen and paper because I know it was short term. It didn't have to be a long term thing. And once it's done, I'm just converting it to an outline and holding on to that for next year or the next one. And that's as far as it goes. So, or I'm not converting that. I'm taking a picture of that one and putting it into, in this case, Obsidian. So like I've found that I've got these short-term things, but then there's also some longer-term, like ongoing maps that's more like article ideas. Like that sort of thing seems to be better suited for digital. Do you find that? Is there a breakdown between those two things? Am I just weird?
So answering from the creator of the mind map, Tony Buzan's perspective, I would say there is not a difference. Answering from the Mike Schmidt's practical perspective, there is absolutely a difference. The value of the digital mind maps is that you can touch your nodes and you can move them around, and the information reorganizes live in front of you. And then you add things like the focus feature and like the ability to hide everything except the certain stuff. So you can kind of get different perspectives and different levels in looking at your information. If you're just trying to make essentially a checklist of things that you're going to reuse, I feel like that doesn't really matter. That could totally happen on a analog mind map. But Blake, geez.
I know.
But if you are trying to develop an idea and you want to explore all aspects of something, being able to move things around and interact with it does add another layer, I feel. So if you were outlining a course or something like that, I would say you're probably not choosing analog to do that. But for the use case that you just mentioned, makes total sense.
Okay, good to know I'm not completely crazy, but I'll keep with it. But yes, to answer the first of these two questions, like the app that I'm using, MindNode, like here's a surprise. I actually put it out on all the social medias, like, what is everybody using? And everybody said MindNode or pen and paper, except for one person, and they said iThoughts. Like, okay, well, I think the consensus is MindNode is where you need to be on this. Now, having said that, of course, the first thing I did was very fiddly, and I had to go build my own theme for it. So that's it's my life. It's the first thing I always do. Style it so that it's as dark as I can get it with monospace fonts and the Joe Bulick color schemes. Like that's always step one.
I mean, I'm not surprised, but yeah, you didn't have to do that.
I know I didn't have to, but it's one of those that I've adjusted so many applications to use that same scheme that seeing something that's not in that scheme that I'm able to put in that scheme, it's distracting if it's not there. So it's actually better if I take that time and get it out of the way, and then I don't have to think about it anymore.
That's fine, but I'm gonna go out. I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say, don't do what Joe did. Just like you're an iPhone unicorn, and people shouldn't follow you in your caseless lifestyle. They should not look to adjust the theme inside of MindNode when you open it. They do have a bunch of pre-built themes, which look pretty decent. If you wanted just a dark mode theme, you can select that. But yeah, you can totally go down the rabbit hole and build your own. And you've got, like, it sounds like a Joe Bulick style guide for this sort of thing. So
yeah. Yep. It was definitely not something that I needed to like go figure out what colors do I want to use. Like I didn't have to do any of that because I've got like 5 to 7 different colors that I already use for all of these different components. So it was not like I had to figure it out. It took like 20 minutes and I had the entirety of it figured out, mostly because I was trying to figure out how the themes work in MindNode. That was the longest part of that.
Sure.
So it wasn't too bad.
Cool. I had no action items from the last book, but I have made several more mind maps. So I continue to use MindNode, and I continue to use the default theme after these many years.
It's almost lame.
Well, MindNode is, looking at some of the other apps that are out there, you mentioned iThoughts. iThoughts is probably one that I would try to theme as soon as I opened it, because it's not super great, but MindNode does a pretty good job on their design, in my opinion. So unnecessary for most. All right. Should we talk about today's book?
We should.
All right. So today's book is I Didn't Do the Thing Today by Madeline Dore. And this was a book that I saw, was intrigued by, and then forgot about. And then somebody that I respect was like, hey, you should read this book. And instantly I was like, yes, I'm going to buy this. We're going to do this for Bookworm. And it's definitely different than a lot of the other productivity books that we have read. In fact, you might call this an anti-productivity book, but it does talk about a lot of productivity concepts. It's just redefining it, in my opinion. We'll get into the specifics of this in a little bit. I'm curious, before we get any further, what was your first impression of this book, Joe?
I thought I was going to get justification for not getting things done on time.
Is that what you got?
I don't think so. Maybe only kind of. I was kind of hoping I would come out of this with a whole bunch of excuses for not doing things that I could use, and really was left with a state of I still need to do things. I just need to not be so hard on myself, I guess. Like it's more of a mental view of how I'm perceiving whether or not I'm getting something done. It was definitely not a book of excuses like I wanted it to be.
And how does that make you feel?
Oh, we're going to do this? Frustrated. That's how it made me feel.
All right. Fair enough. It is a 3-part book, although the majority of the book, when I say majority, the vast majority happens in part 2. So the first part is at the start of the day. Part 2 is the stumbles in the day. And then part 3 is at the end of the day. So you can kind of see how this is broken up, and it's based off of this poem, I Didn't Do the Thing Today, which I don't have in front of me. I didn't jot down that poem. It really didn't add a whole lot of value to me other than to serve as the framework for how she was going to organize the information.
I have it here if you want me to read it.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. I didn't do the thing today. I didn't rise before 7. I didn't change. I didn't pin lines of stream of consciousness. I didn't take my time with a purposeful ritual. I didn't diligently complete my tasks. I didn't move stridently around the park. I didn't write. I didn't start. I didn't finish. I didn't achieve. I didn't progress. And it didn't matter. For doing the thing today isn't the measure of a day.
Yes. And then that comes back at the end as well. The 3 parts are basically diving into the different reasons at the different time periods of your day for why you maybe didn't do the thing. And then all of the individual chapters kind of talk about a specific reason why you might not do the thing. And it's not just an enabling book like Joe was hoping for, where it's okay, but it talks about the root causes and maybe what you can do about it. It is not, I would say, prescriptive. It is definitely not a systems book, and it is not just saying, oh, everything is fine. It does inspire you to make change, but it does so in the tone is very, stop beating yourself up about this so much, and just look for something that will help make a positive change. I feel like this book is very much in line with the tone of that I would like to take in recent history for like what productivity is. And I feel like that is different than the beginning of my productivity journey, which based off of GTD was simply, how do I get more things done? What I've learned over the years is that the reward for getting more things done is you get more work to do. And so that's where you have to learn to say no, and you have to focus, and you have to maintain margin, and all the other things that we've talked about in all the other books that we've read. But if I was going to pick one that was kind of closest to this approach, it would probably be one that pops up several times in this book itself, and that would be The 4,000 Weeks by Oliver Burkeman. Because that, again, is like a very anti-productivity in terms of like the standard message. It feels very contrarian, I guess. And so this is, again, breathing fresh air into this space and hopefully making people feel a little less bad about not achieving the perfect ideal that they tend to hold themselves up to. Or is that just me?
Yeah, I don't hold myself up to any ideals whatsoever. None. Have no expectations of myself. I'm perfectly capable of being comfortable with the amount of work I get done in a day. Yep. 100%.
I detect a hint of sarcasm in your voice, Joe Beasley.
Yep. I have some things I need to sell you if you believe that. So there's that. I think, there's, you made the comment about the more things you get done, the more you are handed. And that was definitely true when I worked in corporate, because it seemed like the more things I could automate, the more things they gave me to automate. That's actually kind of my beginning in the scripting world. It's like I was being given so much work to do that I found that it was easier to write scripts to do it for me. So despite the fact that my job was to be a data analyst, writing scripts was actually the real job, just to do that for me, because I didn't have the time to do the number of reports that they wanted me to do. And it just snowballed out of control from there. And I eventually left. So you see how that turned out. But I think you're absolutely right. The more focus we have on accomplishing more, like that's a forever growing snowball that eventually burns out and smashes into a wall at the bottom of the hill. Like, it just does not go well.
Correct. I'm curious, since you basically said that this is an issue for you too, what was the traditional way that you would try to reconcile this? How did you make peace with the fact that you weren't able to do all the things that you did?
In corporate?
Well, just, you can use that as a starting point, but I think that it is more general than that. As long as you have capacity and you don't have a filter, you will exceed your capacity.
Yeah.
Whatever arena that applies to, fill in the blank for yourself.
Yeah, I guess, when I would try to reconcile that in previous days, it was more that I didn't. It was more just I'm overwhelmed and burnout and just living in that state. That's ultimately what I landed on. And everybody else was in that same state, so it didn't really matter. Like there was no real excuse. I don't know. Like I know I've had a period, maybe a year or so ago, when I felt like I had a pretty good balance between the amount of stuff I had going on and the amount of work I was able to get done. Always thinking I could do more, but not actually getting it done. So it kind of worked out. But I would say that in the last probably 6 to 9 months, that's been slowly changing. Like the workload that's being put on me has grown significantly. And I don't really have any control over that other than how I handle that and delegate it and automate it and such. So this is a timely book for me. So I don't think I could tell you that right now this is how I handle this, because I don't think I handle it well currently.
Gotcha.
I just feel overwhelmed. So I don't think I have a clean, like, I'm really good at saying no. Well, I say no to a lot of things, but not enough. So I don't think I have a clean mental state on it.
Yeah, that's fair. And I don't think that is unique. I think that is the standard approach, is you just keep going until you just can't do it anymore. And then you burn out for a while.
Right. This is, and I don't think we talked about this when we were talking for the Intentional Family podcast, but some of what I do around what we call Acorn Ridge, our home, it's very similar to, like, it's runoffs and derivatives from what I did growing up on the farm. And the problem for me in that is that it can, I can fall into these patterns where things need to be done, and it doesn't matter how I feel, it has to be done. It doesn't matter if that means 4 a.m. It doesn't matter if that means midnight. It doesn't matter how I feel and what my health is. Doesn't matter. Like that's some of the mentality now that doesn't hold true 100% of the time in farm life, but the times that I remember that had the biggest impression on me, that's the part that comes out. So my tendency is to run nonstop 100 miles an hour until it's done. And I know that's not healthy long term. Dealt with the consequences of that a few times, but I know that that's something I've kind of leaned into here recently. So again, I said, this is timely.
Sure. And I recognize that same behavior in myself, which is why I have built into my personal retreat framework that I force myself to stop doing one thing every quarter. Yeah. That's kind of my fail-safe, my release valve, if you will, because if I don't do that, I can pretty much guarantee you over the next 90 days, I'm going to hit the wall.
Yeah.
But this is a more practical book on how to release that pressure a lot of different ways. And I feel like it took me a really long time and a lot of trial and error to get to the point where I created that system. And I was like, this actually works for me. And you don't have to do a personal retreat every 90 days in order to make that work. Let's get into the meat of this book, though. So the first part is at the start of the day, and there's 2 chapters here. Chapter 1 is the narrowing of productivity. Chapter 2 is the expansion of creativity. I love these 2 ideas here. And with productivity in general, I think the focus is on doing. That's kind of her tone with this whole chapter. We're obsessed with doing. I'm not sure that's exactly how I would choose to define productivity, but I don't think that's a wrong approach either.
I feel like there's a lot of different ways you could define it, but I'm trying to find, there's a spot here where she talked about like the root word behind. Yeah, here we go. The root meaning of the word productivity is to lead something forward. So if you think about that, like, and she kind of explains this, if you think about that, you're always kind of leaning forward, always trying to move into the next thing. And there's never, just by that definition, there's not a point at which you stop and celebrate. And there's also not a point at which you stop and plan ahead for the next thing, because you're already leaning into it. If you're following this definition. I think there's probably 4 million different definitions of productivity on the internet right now. So take your pick. But given this particular one, like there's not really a point at which you can ever recover and get your footing if you're always leaning forward into the next thing. If you use that definition, like, that's pretty telling as to what we do to ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And it does lend itself to, like, okay, well, that means that I need to, like, pause and let myself regain balance. But what does that mean? Is that a mental state? Is that physically stopping? You know, there's a whole bunch of different ways that could manifest itself, which I think partially is what we talk about throughout the rest of the book.
Yes, agreed. The big thing with no matter how you define productivity is that the end state is most likely some version of this is my plan for the day. And this plan assumes that everything is going to go perfectly. And it doesn't. Most of the time, it doesn't. And so really the goal of this book, she mentions in this first chapter, is that we all need to figure out how to navigate our own life. We all stumble, we all make mistakes, and we need to remove judgment whenever a day or even an hour goes off track. And that is an ability that we can develop and practice.
Yes. Good job.
All right. So then the next part of that is creativity. And this is something that I have been more and more excited about lately. In fact, I have a YouTube video that I released in the last week. I'm not sure if you've seen this one. It's based off of my Macstock talk, the 42 quick creativity tips. I'll grab the link and I'll put that in the show notes. But basically, it's a 18-minute video, and I based it off of the presentation I gave where I created hand-drawn slides for the best creativity tips that have helped me the most from all the different books that I've read on the topic. And several years ago, I used to think like productivity was the thing for me. And more lately, I'm realizing that actually creativity is the thing for me. That's the way the productivity gets displayed. That's the output of the productivity for me. And I like the yin and the yang here that she's got with productivity versus creativity. Because creativity, the approach that you would take towards productivity is not the same one you can take towards creativity. Now, I do argue that creativity is a formula, and I do believe that. But you can't approach it the same way, like I'm just going to check off this thing and move down the list, right? It doesn't work on command like that, which is actually going to get into the next book that I've picked here. A little bit of foreshadowing there. See if you can figure it out by the time we get there, because it's not in the outline version that you have. So, but I think this is interesting. This whole concept of life being art and living creatively does not mean living sequentially. And if you're going to embrace life as art and embrace creativity, you kind of have to find those moments of inspiration and ride them rather than just move on to the next thing all the time.
Yeah, this is maybe a little bit of a sigh of relief here. Like we've talked about productivity. Productivity has been a thing that you and I have had our hands and fingers in for years now. And no matter how long we've been in it, it doesn't seem to be the main point. Like we would like it to be. Like I would love for it to be something that like I get lots of stuff done every day. Like, and here's how I do it. Well, the real question is like, well, one, how am I sharing what it is I'm doing? What is it I'm making that helps you understand what it is that we're doing? Like, take what we're doing right now for Bookworm. Like, we've read these books and we're creating something that helps other people figure out if they should read the book, or to at least at a minimum get the main takeaways from that book so that they don't have to go through the mess of reading a book they shouldn't read. Like that's a lot of what we do. So it is a creative endeavor, and yet it's kind of productivity in some form. So it does have that outlet. So the question there gets to be like, okay, if productivity is the main thing, you find yourself in this spinning wheel of trying to get more done constantly. But if creativity becomes the focal point, then it has more to do with what are the neat and interesting and fascinating things that I can make that creates an output. Like you can kind of twist it on its head a little bit and make it more about the creation process and not the I have to make another podcast today. Well, what are you going to do unique about it? Like, what's the creative journey you're going to go on to do that? So I think it is slightly just a mindset shift there, but it is more than that, I think, at the end of the day.
I think it's easy to classify productivity as the things that you have to do and creativity as like the things that you want to do.
Yeah.
And based on her format of these two terms in this book. This is actually a good segue. So let's go into the next section here, because in chapter 3, The Hopeless Search for the Ideal Routine, she talks about how creativity doesn't follow a perfectly consistent schedule. However, that is what we try to do a lot of times, is follow a perfectly consistent schedule. When it comes to routines, however, this was an interesting point, I thought. They are actually very fragile because we tend to create these complex routines with a whole bunch of things. And then when one thing doesn't work, it causes the whole house of cards to collapse. And we set ourselves up for failure with this rigid idea of how these routines should actually work. Have you experienced this?
Let's have a little chat about time blocking.
Okay.
That's exactly it. Like that's at least in my head, it's the exact same thing. Like, let me build this preconceived notion of a routine on how it's going to go today and what's going to happen tomorrow. But it doesn't take much to derail the whole thing. How many times has Joe done this experiment of, I'm going to try time blocking, and it falls apart? Like, here you go. This is why, I think. So I don't think that having a routine is a bad thing, but I know that many people need a little bit of diversity in how a day goes so that they can stay interested in it. Otherwise, it's boring. So I get that. And I've never really thought of myself as that type of person. I've always thought of myself as like, I've got my set routines, but within a very small construct, is that true? Like, I have my set of things I do before I go to work in the morning. A lot of that has to do with making sure animals are fed and taken care of right now. Like, that's Joe's life right now. But I also know that when I get to work, there's quite a bit of flexibility, and that's intentional, and it kind of needs to stay that way because I have so many things that could break unknowingly. Like, if the Wi-Fi is down for whatever reason, hey, guess what? It doesn't matter what I set up that morning. That's getting thrown out the window. It has to be set aside. So, yes, routines are fragile.
Yeah,
Don't time block.
The example she uses is simply waking up late. So that's the one that I can relate to. I mean, the Wi-Fi going down, maybe that happens frequently. I don't know. That's a good example.
Not usually,
But
no.
I think it what she's after is things that happen more consistently than that. She talks about consistency a little bit later. We're going to talk about that. But she also shares in this chapter about Austin Kleon having a portable routine, which is just simply several things that he aims to get done in a day. I love this idea. And this has me thinking, I've been starting to track some basic routines in Obsidian lately anyways, and I want to just make my list there. And the goal being not to create a crazy long streak of I've done all of these things all these days in a row. Just make a list of like the nice to have routine items. And I've got a couple ideas for some of those when we get to the action items. But it's a totally different way that I have thought about routines in the past. Because in the past, I was kind of basically thinking like, what is the absolute minimum that I can commit to and absolutely nail this every single day? And I try to do that. And then when I can do that consistently for a really long time, then I'll think about adding maybe one additional thing. And I still think if you're trying to create like a morning routine of essential things you absolutely must do, that maybe that's a good approach. That's basically what I've done with my Bible reading and my prayer routines, my stretching routines. I've got sciatic nerve issues if I don't do my stretches every single day. So I have learned the hard way, like that's non-negotiable, right? So this is kind of talking about the things that are negotiable. Did you read today? Did I practice Spanish? So that's another maybe bad example because I've got that consistently locked in. So I don't know. I'm just trying to pick things that everybody might use. Expressing gratitude is not something that I do every day, right? So I want to make sure that I start tracking that sort of stuff. and just simple, like check the boxes at the end of the day, kind of Austin Kleon style. And I can say, I got 6 out of 8. That's pretty good. And I can feel good about that. But even if I only got 2 out of 8, the approach is kind of like, well, at least I did those 2, as opposed to I had 8 things on my list. And when I woke up late, that basically meant I was never going to get all 8 done. So it was a failure right from the beginning. That's what she's pushing back against.
Yeah, this is more around like you've got a list of things that would be great to do today. If you got them all done, that's amazing. But you have to like choose the ones that are most essential, important, effective, whatever like buzzword you want to use for it. Like you need to choose those and work towards them. But it's all about the mindset you have when you're done, I would say. Like this is my downfall. It's like I see that list of 8 things that you talked about, and I've got 7 of them done, but it was a failure because I didn't get number 8. Like that's kind of my thinking on most days, but that's not true. Like I still got 7 done.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's, and that's maybe why I've been talking about this mental state. Like that's all in your perspective on how you view that, and choosing to say that, hey, that was a success because I got 7 out of 8, instead of saying it was a complete failure because I only got 7 out of 8. It's purely how you see it.
Yeah, that kind of gets into a later point about ambition and goals. But before we get there, I think it's important to talk about time confetti. This is from chapter 4, The Worry of Wasted Time. Time confetti are the minutes that are spent on seemingly insignificant actions and how those add up to a multicolored mound of wasted time. So you can fill in the blank for yourself on what the time wasters are, but it's important to know that people often hide how they waste their time. And I think you and I are probably both guilty of this as well. I do try to be more transparent and share my faults in the places that I don't do the things. Just because I want to be authentic. I understand the tendency is to share the ideal and just share the highlights, right? But people compare that to their backstage, like the everyday. And so I try to compensate for that, but I'm sure there are still times when it doesn't happen. So couple that with the idea of being a time optimist. These are people who overcrowd their schedules because they try to slot all the things in because they assume everything is going to go exactly according to plan, which is kind of getting back to the original discussion we had about your time blocking and how just like block part of it that you can control and just forget about the rest, because that's not lost time, but the minute that you have expectations for how that's going to go, you get upset that it's not meeting those expectations. So I feel like this chapter really is important about embracing there's a whole chapter about embracing limitations, but recognizing that the perfect ideal that you have in your head is not going to be achievable.
Yeah, I think this concept of time confetti, I love the illustration here. It's like I got these little bits of time. They're all over the place. They're all different and they go everywhere. And I never really know where they're going to go, and I never know what's going to, like, how much confetti is going to be in that cannon this time. Who knows? But the thing that I find that I tend to lose time on, and I've talked about this before, is in those transition times when I'm moving from one task to the other. The problem, and time blocking is, I feel like, a really good example of so many of these things that have gone wrong for me, because it's a very clean, calculated experiment, because it's got a lot of math to it, right? Because of time. So I find that whenever I do a time block schedule, even if it's just for the morning, let's call it 8 to noon, like, very simple 4 hours, 4 1-hour tasks, 8 30-minute tasks. Like you can break that up in however many different ways you want. The issue gets to be, like, if I have a task that's slotted for 30 minutes and it takes 25, I feel like I just gained 5 free minutes there. And then I have a tendency like, okay, well, I got 5 minutes before the next slot needs to start, so I'm going to check a couple things quick before that gets here. And then I'm 10 minutes late on the next thing. And then that derails the next one, because then I'm not done early on the next one. And then maybe I get early again, and then I do it again. So then like I end up with these little chunks that throw the whole thing off, and I just can't stick to that tight schedule. So I'm finding that the concept of like this portable routine is probably the better way to do that. Trying to lock in exact times for it just it doesn't work well. As much as I've attempted it and had like minor successes, overall it doesn't work out. And I think it's purely like the viewpoint, but it's also a big part of this. Like, I've got a few minutes here and there. I'm just going to do this quick thing. And then it's not a quick thing. That's where I lose a lot of time. And I'm really bad at that.
Well, if you're time blocking, you realize those little pockets are there at least. And so I think what she's describing is really for people who do not time block. Because for me, the minute that I start time blocking, I at least become aware of them. But if you aren't time blocking, you don't realize how many of those little couple minutes here, a couple minutes there pockets that you do end up wasting. And again, this is framed through the lens of don't beat yourself up about this, but recognizing that you have those and then having a realistic list of things that you are trying to get done in the day. Like that's the other part of time blocking that I think is important. If a time optimist just sits down and blocks their day, it's going to be a disaster at the beginning, but then you learn from that mistake. You eventually land on, you know what, this is what I can get done in a day and feel good about the workload on average. It's hard to quantify it. In my experience, you just kind of feel it out, but eventually you do it enough, you get enough feedback loops, and you have a pretty good sense of what you can handle. But that does get into the next thing on the outline here, the moving the goalposts, because ambition definitely manifests in trying to do a whole bunch of things in those time confetti slots that you're just talking about. She says, ambition can create an avalanche of dissatisfaction. And I love this. When I heard her talking about ambition, my mind instantly went to goal setting. That's not the big point she was making, but she does kind of talk about drive and being driven are two different things. Drive, I think, is the one that she typically associates with an end point. I'm going to achieve this outcome, achieve this goal. But being driven is just, I want to make the most of the resources that I have. And I feel like that's an important distinction between those two ideas. When you work to achieve your ambitions, you undermine your daily happiness because you get so attached to the outcome that you are trying to achieve. And if there was the actual amount of satisfaction that you got from achieving that goal that you project when you are pursuing it, it would be no big thing. But it never measures up, because as soon as you achieve that goal, there's this vacuum, and then you have to fill that with something else. And she calls this the hedonic treadmill, where your brains adjust to the success and you look for the next big thing. But that's frustrating in the long term because you never actually arrive. So I don't know. I could go on talking about goal setting, but probably just leave that there.
There's so much here. Like, you can control only so much, and you can only think about it so many different ways, right? And it's easy for us to view goals as the end all be all. We tend to do that. Like, corporate makes it basically the focus of every employee, at least every corporation I've been in or worked with, consulted with. It seems like that's always it. Even when I was doing web contracts for companies, like the people I would work with would regularly say, hey, I need to do this by this time, or it needs to cost this much. Can I pay you this much ahead of time in order to, because it's all about the end goal of hitting a certain something. Like, that's all it is. It's not about an ongoing component. It's purely, this has to be done by this time, and I need to look this good doing it. Like, it's always that way. And if you don't think it's that way, probably don't have the whole picture. Like, that's my guess. Yep. Could be wrong. I'm okay being told I'm wrong. But everything seems to revolve around that. And when you have your goalposts set up around something that can move, then it gets really complicated to know, how are you doing? is it's always going to grow. Like you're only going to say yes to things if it's always about hitting that next goal. So I don't know. I think I'm probably like you. I could ramble and ramble and ramble, but I find that most of my own shortcomings when it comes to productivity or creativity, depending on what your focus is here, it has a lot to do with how I view my own motivation and my success in accomplishing things. And it's that ambition to try to get a bunch of things done that I tend to view incorrectly. So I think that's what she's telling me to stop doing.
Sure. Well, you mentioned the goalpost being set up around something that moves. As long as your goal is external and outcome, it's going to move. She touches on this a little bit, but doesn't lean into it a whole lot in this chapter. But she does say that what we accomplish doesn't change who we are. So the focus should be on who are you becoming, not what are you achieving. That's the only sort of goalpost that is ever going to be achievable. Yeah, don't move the goalpost. It's frustrating. It sounds stupid when you think about that, but then we go and we set goals, and that's exactly what we do. So just another encouragement, I guess, to figure out what is the thing you want to do, not so that you can say you did the thing, but so you can say, this is who I became in the process, which kind of leads into the next one here about intensity versus consistency. These are two terms that I think she kind of talks about throughout a couple of different chapters. The next chapter is the myth of balance here, but consistency and intensity, the big takeaway from this for me is not an original idea that she had, but something that she shared by Simon Sinek, where intensity is going to the dentist and having a professional cleaning, but consistency is brushing and flossing every day. And in terms of long-term health, intensity is not enough. You have to have consistency. Now, she does change that a little bit because she is saying that consistency doesn't need to be perfect. When it comes to brushing your teeth, I don't know, maybe I'm weird in this, but like I don't need to track that habit. I'm doing that one twice a day, every day. And so that's where the analogy falls down a little bit, I think, because you're not going to tell somebody don't brush your teeth every day, right? But when it comes to the habits and the routines that you would create, like maybe you're trying to write every day. Okay, well, if you only write 50% of the time and you write 15 days out of 30, that's still a huge win. And that's probably a more extreme example than she would even share in terms of like what is consistency. But the big thing that I wanted to call out here is that consistency is more important than the intensity, which right away is going to be contrary to how some people view goals and moving the needle. But also that consistency doesn't have to be perfect. And if you do it more often than not, then that is winning.
I think that's where I fall down with this. Like I'm really good at the intense side of this like teeter-totter. Like I'm really good at that. Take last summer with the house project, like 3 months, full speed. I can do that. Or, I've got a big video project that needs done in a week. Sure, I can do that. But putting together the recordings for our weekly sermons and posting those every single week, can I get somebody to help me do that? Like that's that's my downfall. And anybody who's followed me online for any length of time, say 3 weeks, like that's how I operate. I tend to do some small things very big, and then I will take a break. Not intentionally, it's just kind of how it's worked. So the consistency piece has always been a downfall for me. I'm aware of that. Thus, something like Bookworm works out because Mike is expecting me to show up every week. So it helps in that. Otherwise, it would probably get put off more often than it should or die off completely. So thanks, Mike, for keeping Bookworm alive.
You're welcome.
But yeah, that's easily the balance that I struggle with. Easy. Like I wish that something like being consistently posting on things was something I was good at, but it never really has been. So I've done everything I could to make that easier, and that helps, but I still need to have some form of like an external motivator in order to hit that piece. So again, this has to do with, the expectations, right? Like like what you were saying, if you do 15 or 18 out of 30, like that's still a big win. I see that as a failure if it's not every time. Like if I miss one, it's a failure, so why do it at all? Like that's
Yeah.
generally been my perspective. I'm aware that that's wrong. I don't think I could have told you that was what was going on until we read this. Like I don't think I could have explained that. So this might be a case of more knowledge about the thing helps, and the more I understand it, the more it helps. But I can't answer that. It's a long-term thing that I got to work through.
Well, I can tell you this was very timely for me because there are certain things that I have no trouble doing consistently. Bookworm would be one of them. Most of the podcasts that I do are fairly consistent at this point. That's just part of the rhythm of my days. However, I've been thinking a lot about what do I want the ideal content schedule to look like for faith-based productivity. Essentially, my personal brand. All the different places that people can find stuff that I make. And yes, Bookworm is a part of that. Focused is a part of that. Intentional Family is a part of that. But then there are the ones that I really haven't been able to dial in. I am terrible at posting blogs. I am meh at writing my newsletter. I went through the Part-Time YouTuber Academy and I got super excited about YouTube videos, and I do one every couple of weeks, right? And it's easy for me to take any of those in isolation and say, well, I should publish a YouTube video every single week, or I should write a newsletter every 2 weeks. And this chapter helped me come to peace with the fact that I don't need to do that stuff as consistently as I pressure myself to. The 42 creativity tips video that I published, that one took significantly longer. And my approach to the newsletter, which is really like the beginning point of some of the ideas that I'm wrestling with, and then like the YouTube videos, I view that as like the expression of that after I've had a chance to talk through it on a podcast and kind of really have solidified my thoughts on it. I've kind of decided that I want to create high quality stuff, but I don't want to do it on a strict schedule. So the 42 creativity tips, I view that as like planting a flag in the ground. This is a piece of content that I want to be associated with me for a very long time. It's not, I've got to make a video this week, which is different than a lot of other YouTubers. And maybe that's the wrong approach, but also like decide what the right approach is for you. And I was very much beating myself up because stuff is happening at the day job and I didn't get to write the newsletter this week. And now I feel bad because I'm behind, and who cares? I'm still exercising the creative process, and maybe it's not happening quite as fast as I would like, but that's okay. I am fine just saying, if I get instead of releasing a YouTube video every week, if I get 2 out this month, that's good enough. At least I made 2 videos. Or instead of a newsletter every 2 weeks, it's 3 to 4 weeks. That's okay. Most of the time when that happens, it's because I've been thinking about an idea and I wasn't quite sure how I wanted to say it. So by the time I do get around to saying it, it's got a lot more meat on the bone. So I don't know. This has helped me a lot not to feel like I have to check the box every single time. And maybe that's just my personality, where I tend to be a perfectionist and I want to check all those boxes. But identify what are the things that are the non-negotiables, and then the other stuff by default is negotiable.
Yeah, I'm with you on the whole perfect streak thing. Like I've been that way since I was little. If I couldn't do something perfect right away, I didn't want to do it at all. And I see that in my daughter. Like my oldest is exactly the same way. Like when she tries something and it doesn't work the way she thinks it should, or she wasn't good enough to do it right the first time, she's like, there's no point in doing this. Why does anyone ever do this? Because it's so hard. Like you tried it once. You tried to kick the soccer ball with a curve once and it didn't work. And it just means you need to practice. I tell my kids that, and yet if I'm not able to do something perfect the first time, I feel like there's no point in doing it. But it's on a different scale, it's in a different arena, so obviously it's different. It can't like that lesson can't carry over because it's very different. This is an adult, not a kid. Of course, this is different. No, it's the same. I regularly think that I didn't get all the newsletters out that I wanted to, so then I haven't done one in over a year. Like that happens. If I miss one, I'm more likely to miss a whole bunch coming up after that, just because the streak's now broken. So I I am not good at this. Obviously, feel like that's like a central theme that keeps coming up here. So I stink at it.
Well, the reason you may stink at it is the next point on the outline, and that is comparison. So this is a really powerful chapter. It's a really big idea. And I don't know, there could probably be a whole book written about this specific topic.
Probably is.
But comparison, I recognize, is the source of the perfectionism a lot of times for me, because I compare, well, there's all these other people who are kind of doing sort of the same thing you're doing, but they're able to publish a newsletter every week. So you should be able to do that. And that is not a good idea. She says that comparison is comparing your behind the scenes with someone else's highlight reel. I really like that explanation. And yes, that applies to like the social media stuff, but really just if you take your favorite creator online, you have to recognize that this bias is going to be there. One of my action items is to at least recognize who are the people that I end up comparing myself to. I have a rough idea. A couple come to mind right away, but I want to make a list of this, because if you can figure out what is the thing for you, that is what she calls your secret joy. And your secret joy is life-giving. But when you compare yourself to somebody else and what somebody else is doing, then all that joy is gone. You basically just give it away. And it's replaced with the productivity guilt and the pressure of creating on the schedule. She says, when we follow our secret joy, the urge to compare dissipates. So I think step one for me is recognizing who I compare myself to. Step two is something I'm kind of been noodling on even before reading this book, and that is, what do I want the mix to be? Because ultimately, what I want with all the stuff that I do online is to build a community, basically, of people who are trying to do the best with what they've got to work with. And there's a lot of different avenues for that. The podcasts are part of that. The YouTube is part of that. I've actually been messing around with Circle lately, and I have on my website, if you go to faithbasedproductivity.com, there's a little chat bubble in the bottom that looks like one of those intercom bubbles. That actually takes you to a Circle community that I guess now I'm announcing that it is a thing. It really isn't a whole lot there yet. I'm kind of building it out first, but really I just want to create things that will hopefully help people who are struggling with this same sort of thing. Like, how do I make the most of the time, the talent, the energy, the talents that I have been entrusted with? I want to be a good steward of everything that I've got to work with, and I want to make the biggest dent in the universe that I can. So finding other people who are going to help encourage me along the way and share what works, share what doesn't, not so that we can compare to each other, right? But we can hopefully just find something that resonates with us and do a little bit better with whatever sort of impact we want to have. How can we make, what sort of legacy do you want to leave? How can you do that even just a little bit better? If you can move the needle at any form, then that is a win. And so that's kind of like the life theme. That's an idea I talk about in my course. Like, I want to help people answer the question, why am I here? By inspiring, encouraging, and teaching them to connect to their calling, discover their destiny, live the life they were created for. Well, how do I practically do that? The stuff that I'm doing online basically is what I've landed on.
One of the things I feel like I mention to my kids regularly is, don't worry about what your sister's doing, worry about what you're doing, and I'll take care of your sister. Like that, that concept comes up a lot just with kids. And it's like, take care of you. Don't worry about what she's doing. You can't change what she's doing. You can only react to what she's doing. I wish I took that to heart as much as I want my kids to take that to heart, because this is exactly what I think she's getting at, in that when we compare to other people, or we're paying so close of attention to what someone else is doing, we lose track of ourselves and what we're focused on and what we're growing in. And it's easy to become so absorbed in that other person's actions, or as you've said, like the highlight reel that they're releasing. You become so focused on that you lose track of your own efforts, or you don't have efforts of your own in any way, in any form. And I know this is absolutely true for me. If we look at what we've been talking about, consistency and creativity, consistency in content creation and such, it's something that I know I would love to be great at, is being consistent on those things. I feel like this can kind of morph into that portable routine where you've got these things that you're trying to do each day, and you just release it when it's ready, or before it's ready, and get it out the door. But it doesn't have to be on such a strict routine. I know that all the algorithms want you to be on some routine, but unless this is like your full-time job, it's not going to be that vital. And I feel like the number of people that it's their full-time job, like if it's your full-time job, you have a lot of people helping you hit that schedule. I feel like I just recently saw Tiago Forte put out was it a tweet or something else? There was like a map of all the people that are helping him do everything he does for Forte Labs and building a second brain and everything that's around that. And I remember looking through that chart and thinking, holy buckets, that's a big team for what I'm seeing him release. Now, I'm fully aware he's got a whole bunch of stuff that I don't see that he's releasing, but there's a lot there. So it's tough for someone like me who has 0 people behind what I'm doing online. And then I'm comparing to what he has going on. And I don't compare to Tiago Forte. I'm just using that as an example because he's way above me on all that. But if I made that comparison, like it's not a fair fight. Like it's not apples to apples here. Like it's completely different arenas. And you're working on selling oranges and he's over there selling Ferraris. Like this is very different in what we're doing. So you can't make that comparison. And the problem gets to be that I don't know the full backstory behind somebody who's posting a newsletter every week. Maybe that's their one and only thing. I'm comparing against somebody who's got a newsletter that comes out every week. And then I turn around and compare to somebody who's got a YouTube video that comes out every other day. But those are 2 different people. But I'm still making that comparison and thinking I should do both when neither of them are doing both. So it's a slippery slope, can get messy real fast. I wish I took this to heart. Hopefully I'll do better. Lessons I need to learn.
Or if they do both, then they have a whole bunch of help, like you mentioned, because Tiago talks about all the different people that help him with all the different stuff that he does. And he's a bit of a polarizing figure on Twitter because he makes claims like you can't be successful in YouTube unless you spend 25 grand a month or something like that.
Sure, yeah.
And I don't think Ali Abdaal would agree with you. He's got a whole part-time YouTuber Academy is built on the premise that you don't need to have a whole bunch of expensive gear and a whole bunch of people in order to make this work. But you do have to figure out what is the thing for you. And Tiago has done a good job of defining this is what success on YouTube looks like for me, and these are the resources that I need in order to make it happen. And you can't just compare what you're doing with what he's doing. When he made that other tweet about how much it costs to run a YouTube channel, immediately it forced me to think about like, well, what's his goal and what's my goal, right? My goal is not going to be the same as his goal in my video. I'm not flying anywhere with a production team and sitting down with somebody to do an interview like he is, but I don't know, that's not right or wrong. That just my thing is different. So you got to figure that out for yourself. Once you do figure that out for yourself, that I think informs the expectations that you would set around it. So if you don't take the time to figure it out, if you do get stuck in that comparison trap, then by default, your expectations are going to be way too high. And those set us up for failure when we can't hit them. Even if you do define for yourself and you're just trying to time block your day, you will run into this where you have these expectations of how a day is going to go, and it doesn't go according to plan. And so there's a lot of good stuff in this chapter. One of the things she talks about is create intentions, not expectations. I like this a lot with the day job. We do this where whenever we're talking about something and there's an action item that's associated with it, or we're getting to the point where action needs to be taken with something, someone will say something like, I intend to, and then you fill in the blank. And that becomes the action item, as opposed to just creating a big list of the things that have to get done and then no one follows through on them. You're practicing the extreme ownership and you're taking control of the situation. You say, this is my plan of action, right? And by saying I intend to means that this is what you're planning to do, but everybody knows that your plan will probably get blown up. So we're not going to hold you to a perfect standard if you don't get this sort of thing done. I think that's a small distinction, but it's really important. And especially when you're working with other people, that's really one of the things that makes the clash of the personalities less of an issue when you're all playing by the same rules. Because again, we do judge others by their actions and ourselves by our intentions. So you're kind of forcing people to give other people the benefit of the doubt by framing it that way.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Just don't compare yourself to other people. Basically, that's the moral of the story. Don't do it. So stop it, Mike.
Yep. The other thing with expectations here, though, is that you are not what you do. So you can have these expectations, and when you don't hit them, you feel like a fraud. You have this mini identity crisis. At least I have. So decoupling your identity from the things that you do, I feel, can go a long way towards managing the disappointment that can come with expectations. She mentions in chapter 9, The Great Disappointment of Expectations, that we are verbs, not nouns. So that means that you are not a writer. You are someone who writes. And there's a complementary idea here from Atomic Habits by James Clear, where if you want to create a writing habit, the way to do that is to assume the identity. So I'm not quite sure how to reconcile that in my head yet, but I do think that in terms of measuring what you were able to get done, it's easy to think like a fraud if you do associate with that identity. I am a writer. I am a YouTuber. Well, when's the last time you created a YouTube video, right? So break it. I guess my current thinking on this is to break it down into the component parts, and writing is really at the basis of everything creative that I do. So that's the thing I want to start tracking consistently. I'm not going to hit it every day, but did I do my best to create something, right? Going back to the daily question stuff. And then try to hit that more often than I can, but also recognizing that if I don't get to it, it's okay, because that's not the totality of who I am.
I feel like there's a lot here, of course, but when it comes to the expectations piece, the ones that I think are the most difficult are the ones I'm not aware that I've set. Like if I have expectations for, like, I'm a writer, well, then you immediately have expectations for number of blog posts you're going to write, maybe number of books in a few years you're going to write, the newsletter release cycle. Like you're going to have immediate expectations for that. And I feel like that's kind of an explicit known, you're going to have those expectations. The ones I think that get to be complicated are when you don't really realize that you have them. And I say that knowing that I do this a lot unknowingly. This has kind of revealed some of that. We've talked about this consistency piece and not following through on things long term. But the part behind that is that I can't say that I knew that I had the expectation of having that perfect streak. And when it fails, then it all comes crumbling down. But I don't think I even realized that I had that expectation and didn't really have the words to tell you that that's what was going on. I just felt like something was wrong and I'm just not going to do it. Like something's not right, so I'm just going to take a break and not come back to it because it doesn't seem to feel right when I'm there. So that expectation is set, not met, and then leaves me feeling, I don't want to say depressed, but down as a result of it, or
Yeah.
like I'm not good enough in that arena, so I might as well not work there, when that's not the point at all.
Yep.
That's not the case.
Well, one of the things that can be an indicator, I think, as to whether your expectations are off is this feeling and also this phrase that we typically use when people ask us, how are you doing or what's going on? It's like, I'm so busy. She mentions
Yeah.
in this chapter that phrase, I'm so busy, that means essentially, I have a lot that I should be doing. And when you frame it that way, I kind of resent it. Like if
Yeah.
I were to say, I have a lot I should be doing, my immediate next thought is, well, who decided I should be doing these things? Probably not me, those jerks.
Yeah.
So immediately I'm looking for things to chop. And this kind of gets into the next point on the outline in the next chapter in the book. Chapter 10 is the trap of busyness, right? So busyness is, I would argue, the default for a lot of people, but it also saps our ability to be creative. So we are either busy, or the flip side of this for a lot of people is you feel like you're not doing enough because everybody else is busy. So what's wrong with me if I'm not busy? Am I not important? And one of the things she mentions is that we all have an area of our life which is our busyness of choice. So I think this is important to consider. I don't have an action item associated with this. I do have lots of action items because I kind of know what are the areas that I tend to get busy. So figure that out. And then the fact that you need rest is not a moral failure. So that's on the other side of this. If you're not busy, you're getting the rest that you need. You don't feel that stress and that anxiety all the time, but you don't have to feel bad about that. She mentions that productivity often has less to do with the number of hours we squeeze out of the working day and more to do with our energy, focus, and attention. So it's really about managing those things. It's not about even being max output for 8 hours a day, a typical working day. And there's different areas that we need rest as well. So the 7 areas she mentioned: physical, mental, sensory, creative, emotional, social, and spiritual. I really like these because it forces you to think about, maybe I am getting rest in one area, but I'm not allowing myself to rest in another area. I realized when I was trying to hit all those deadlines with all the creative stuff, I wasn't getting enough creative rest, and so just going at my own pace and being okay with that. The other thing she talked about in here, which I think is a whole big discussion that we've probably talked about a little bit before, is that the pandemic forced us to take a break. It forced us to have rest in specific areas, not all areas, but it disrupted our whole idea of what is normal. It was a big reset for a lot of people. People who felt like they didn't have the ability to say no to things, all of a sudden those things were automatically said no to. And the opportunity was to be selective about which things you put back into your calendar. And I think there's still some ability to do that. It's not too late, basically, is my my encouragement here. But don't wait for a cultural event like that to force you to take a break. Most of the time, that is not going to happen. And if you want to have this margin in your life, you have to create it yourself.
Just had a long conversation with my wife, Becky, here 2 days ago about, what does this week look like for you at work? Is this a busy week? Is this an easy week? Is this a normal week or is it a busy week? It's like, well, I got the outdoor service, so of course it's a busy one. She's like, well, what do you have going on? I'm like, well, and I started like rattling off the stuff she understands about all the things that I've got to do that are involved with that. She's like, oh, so it's actually a busy week. It's like, and then so that spurred the conversation of, well, I tend to refer to pretty much every week as a busy week because I have so many things going on at work that I need to reset what is normal because a full week I tend to refer to as busy because it feels like there's so much going on. But I'm still comparing it to the workload I had about a year and a half ago, which I haven't really seen in a long time. And I still think of that as normal, but we're way above that as far as how much I'm trying to get done in a week and how much stuff has to be done in a week for the ministries here to continue going on. So I think I'm definitely one of the people who says I'm busy all the time. And it's basically I've got more things on my plate than I can get done. That's the badge of honor I'm theoretically holding up. And it's not true. And it's something that since that conversation, I've been actively working this week to figure out what is a normal accepted amount of work that we can be doing as a tech department here in a week. And how do we either automate, scale up, get help to accommodate the stuff outside that limit so that we're not constantly saying, hey, we're busy. No, can't do that. Too busy. Busy, busy, busy. Stop saying busy. Like it's getting to be obnoxious. So I need to scale that back.
Well, you mentioned hitting the limit. That is the other point here, the limitations. When you recognize your limitations and recognize that you can't squeeze everything in, that makes this easier. However, in the chapter where this comes from, chapter 11, the denial of limitations, she mentions that prioritizing systems can further perpetuate our urge to self-blame. I'm a systems thinker, so
Yep.
This was uncomfortable when I read it, but she's absolutely right. One of my favorite things from the entire book comes from this chapter, and that is the phrase, when someone asks you to do something, I must decline for secret reasons. I think I'm going to start using that. Or I'd like to start using that. I have trouble thinking of a situation where someone wouldn't push back on that, but maybe they won't. But that'd be kind of cool if that starts saying, I must decline for secret reasons and just leave it at that.
Yep. Too busy. Must decline. Not going to tell you why. It's been a while back, but I don't remember the specific book, but maybe it was Boundaries. But it talked about how when you need to get out of something or you're in a situation where you need to set a limit, it's okay to set the limit, but not explain it.
Yeah. You could just say no. So this is like giving a reason, but it's saying, I'm not going to tell you the reason.
Right. What was the study? They did a study on that, and it was something simple, like using a copier, where if you gave a reason, any reason, people would go along with it more often, even if to the point, like, can I cut ahead of you in line because I need to make copies?
Mm-hmm.
And people were more inclined to say yes if you said, because I need to, well, it's a copier. Of course, that's what you're going, like, it's very point blank. And yet that is what makes people feel more comfortable. So I'm sure that saying I need to decline for secret reasons probably does help and does work. That's my expectation, Mike.
Yeah, that's cool. The next chapter is the harsh rules of discipline. And just a couple things I wanted to talk about here real quick. There's a quote from Oscar Wilde, which I loved. Without order, nothing can exist. Without chaos, nothing can evolve. So there is going to be chaos, and that's why discipline is important. There's this idea of delightful discipline, which is based on this curiosity for knowledge, commitment to the practice without the rigid obedience to, I just have to do this thing, which kind of changes it from a negative thing where I have to do it to something fun where I get to do it. And she talks about eat that frog not always being the right approach. That reminded me of the Atomic Essay by Jesse J. Anderson, host of the ADHD Nerds podcast. So I'll put a link to that in the show notes. But his essay, which is where I first became aware of him, was eat the ice cream, not the frog. She has a different thing that you're supposed to eat. I forget what it was. Some sort of like cottage cheese or something. And I was like, no, it's disgusting. But point taken.
Yeah. I don't remember what it was. I was trying to find it, but I can't place what it was. It was not a frog. It was not ice cream. I don't know what it was.
Yeah, it's really insignificant. It doesn't really matter, but I thought it was a strange choice for
Yeah.
what she used there. But anyways, and then the last thing from this whole section that I wanted to call out was the push and pull of distraction. This isn't even an original idea, but she mentioned something from Sherry Turkle. I don't recall this from the book that we read by Sherry Turkle, but she mentions it from the TED Talk. There are 3 fantasies that are promised by devices, and specifically like smartphones. Number 1, that we can put our attention wherever we want it to be. Number 2, that we will always be heard. And number 3, that we will never be alone. And when you combine those 3 together, it's pretty easy to see why we keep going back to that well and we keep being disappointed.
Because we always want to be with someone else. Like this, we've talked about this before too. The need for interpersonal connection, like friendships, relationships with other people, like that's a foundational crux of the human experience, right? And it's what helps us thrive in some way or another. Despite how many times we say, that the world would be a better place were it not for people. Like that's definitely a sentiment I hold once in a while, but it is absolutely incorrect. But it's one that I know that if we're able to find ways to not be alone and do life with other people, like that's, I find the most joy-filled way of living and making that a focal point. Now, I don't think that's the focal point, but a focal point to hold on to. So anytime we've got distractions that pull us away from that, whether it's a phone, a computer, YouTube video, or something else, which could be, something in the physical realm like woodworking, like that could be a distraction too. I feel like that's rare though, but that can also be a detriment. So as I continue to say, don't do that.
That's a great spot to go into the last section, I think, because you talked about being with people. Part 3 is at the end of the day. And there's 3 chapters here: the generosity of kindness, the depth of curiosity, the moments of enjoyment. This is the weakest part of the book, in my opinion. It doesn't fit with the analogy, the beginning, throughout the day, and then at the end. I think you could summarize this as be kind, stay curious, and be present.
Yeah, that's probably the way to do it. I struggle. I think I know what she was trying to do, but she had, like, at the start of the day, like talking maybe like routines and such is there at the beginning, because like, we think of like morning routines, like that's a thing, right? And then stumbles in the day, like let's talk about all these things that we do throughout our workday and our creative endeavors and such. Let's talk about those. And then at the end of the day, I feel like you should be talking about like reflection or of some kind, like some like evening routine type thing, like to use that whole analogy. But then she went metaphorical on it, like at the end of the day, meaning a wrap up of everything. Like she went that direction with it, and it threw me for a loop. I was like, oh, come on. You had this. And then you skipped over it. But I like your analogy here, like the be kind, stay curious, be present. All of those could be applied in many, many arenas here, but ultimately it's, if you're able to be here in the moment, make the best decision you can, be curious about the best way of doing something, and be kind to those around you, like using your stuff there. Like if you put all that together, like you're less likely to have that productivity guilt that this whole book has been trying to help us shed.
Mm-hmm.
So do that. Instead of saying, don't do that, I'll tell you to do that one.
I guess the reason I feel it is a weak ending is because it is framed as the third part of the book. It could probably be consolidated into a single chapter. There's good stuff in here. Half of my action items come from this section. So 2 of the 4. And I think the thing that brings this together is sort of like if you were to do a evening journaling routine, these are the kinds of things that you would tend to put in there. The middle part is so long, though, that this does, just by comparison, because it comes after, feel like it's just tacked on. There's not nearly as much substance here. I don't even know how many pages this last section is. But I remember going through the second section and being like, we're getting close to the end of the book. Shouldn't I be in part 3 by now? So I don't think we need to do a deep dive here. I will share a couple of my action items from this section because the topics here of kindness, this is important. She actually mentions something here that I've said a couple times, I think even in this podcast, that I did not pick up from her initially, but we tend to judge others by their actions, ourselves by our intentions. But she's saying, what if you flip that around? What if you gave other people the benefit of the doubt? And can you bring energy to others rather than draining it, is something she asked on page 264. That reminded me of the action item I had at one point where I rated all of the relationships in my life from plus to minus in terms of when I talk to this person, typically, are they going to add life to me or take it from me? So this is a different way of framing it, but the same basic idea. I think that's pretty cool. And the big takeaway is that a small gesture of kindness can change a bad day into a good one. So why would you not try to make that positive change in people's lives? The idea of curiosity, I feel like this is really just a life perspective that we need to have. When you're curious about things, you're less attached to checking things off of the list. Curiosity is key to creativity, is something that she mentions, and encourages us to find the extraordinary in the ordinary. So one of my action items here is to make a list of the good, small, ordinary things that I tend to take for granted in my day-to-day. And then the last chapter, the moments of enjoyment, this is where the being present idea that you talked about earlier kind of comes in. You're never going to get to the point where your days are without dramas, but be present in the day and ask yourself basically, what can I get out of today, and enjoy the experience.
And all of that is followed up by a poem, which is different than the one at the beginning. Are you ready for this? Can I read this one now?
Go for it.
So the beginning one, I read earlier. The one at the very end has a little bit of a different take to it. So here you go. I didn't do the thing today. I didn't lament how the hours unfolded. I didn't worry about wasted time. I didn't allow my expectations to spoil what I have. I didn't compare myself to others. I didn't dwell in the undone. I didn't strive. I didn't try to be perfect. And it mattered, because in all that I didn't do, I found my own measure of a day.
Yeah,
there you go.
It's a really cool way to end it.
I feel like there should be more books that start and end with poems. I kind of liked that. That was fun.
Sure.
Kind of a unique, creative thing that she did there.
Very nice. All right, action items.
Hit me. What you got?
I have 4 of them. So the first one is from the second section. Let's see, what chapter was this? It was to make a list of the things that settle me. Oh, this was the idea from chapter 3 with the routines. She doesn't just flat out say routines are bad, by the way. She says a routine can be the thing that gets us stuck in a rut, but it can also be the thing that gets us out of one. So I want to make a list of the things that settle me. The second one is to make a list of the people that I compare myself to. The third one is to make a list of the good, small, ordinary things that I mentioned. And then the fourth one comes from the generosity of kindness. I want to find a way to do some unprompted kind thing every day. And I'm purposely leaving that ambiguous because the easy one is just sending an encouraging text message to somebody. But I want to go beyond that and find some additional ways. Get creative with my kindness, if you will. What about you?
I have 2. One kind of plays off of what you were just talking about. I termed it a little bit different than you, and I wrote down 1 generous act a day. And that sounds simplistic, but I wrote underneath of that can be defined by giving more than was originally expected. And that can manifest itself in a lot of different ways. I know, like, a lot of times when somebody brings a computer or a tech support thing, like, I fix the problem and that's as far as it goes. But if I were to take one extra step and then take a little bit more time and maybe make it easier for them to do things on their own without just solving that immediate problem, sometimes they can go better. I would classify that as being generous in that case because I don't normally do that. So that's one that I have. The other one is, and I think I've talked about this. I don't think I said that I have this as an action item, but I want to put together this portable routine idea. I know routines can have a bit of a downfall given how she terms it anyway. But if I were to put together a list of these things that I want to accomplish in a day, attempt to adjust my expectations on what success means for that, and shoot for those things, and having that list of things that I'm going to work towards accomplishing each day, like to try to build some of that consistency. I feel like that would be a lot. That would be a much more productive way for me to come at it. So yes, I'm aware I'm using that productivity type word there, but I want to try something along these lines, namely putting together lists of things that I need to try to work towards every day, but being generous with myself and being okay with it if it's not done. Trying, Mike. Gonna try.
All right. So that brings us to style and rating, my book. So I go first. I think this is a very interesting style, and it's a very interesting take on the topic of productivity. And I would argue creativity, although it's positioned specifically to deal with this topic of productivity guilt, where we beat ourselves up for not living up to this ideal standard that we have no sense measuring ourselves by. I feel that is a very important message. And this is kind of the first book that I've seen really talk to this. I know Oliver Burkeman in 4,000 Weeks, some of the stuff that he's written and created lately, he's leaning more this direction as well. But this is a very different tone than that book. I like this book a lot. I definitely think people should read this one. I think if you're reading anything in the productivity or self-help space, you're going to naturally create this standard in your head. And it's not even somebody's fault if they write about it a certain way. This is just what your brain is going to do. And so addressing the elephant in the room per se is really important. I feel like there's a lot of great stuff in here. She cites a lot of other resources, a lot of other things that we have read. Talks about flow, talks about mindset, talks about 4,000 weeks, all sorts of stuff. But there were also a bunch of additional data points and things that I jotted down that like, oh, I'd never heard of that one before. So there's a good mix here of like familiar stuff plus new stuff, which to me communicates that she really knows her stuff. It's not a systems book for sure. If you're looking for something that's going to give you a prescriptive approach to overcoming the productivity guilt, this is not it. But it is going to shine a light on a lot of the contributing factors towards that. You do have to figure out for yourself what are the things that you can do that are going to help alleviate this, which I actually appreciate the fact that she's putting the onus on you and you got to take responsibility for changing your own situation. So I'm going to rate this, let's go 4.5. I do think it's really good. I don't know that there is anything life-changing in here. I think that is probably okay. Just the topic itself is not something that, oh my gosh, this is the key to unlocking the next level for me. But again, that's like drifting into the territory that she's trying to push back against. So I think my personality, I tend to lean towards that stuff anyways, which is why I'm trying to struggle between like 4.0 and 4.5. I'm saying that I recognize my own bias, and for the average person, this is probably more helpful even than what I got out of it. That being said, I did get a lot out of it. I got 4 action items out of it and enjoyed every minute that I was reading this one.
Okay. I want to speak a little bit to the three-partedness of this one, because that first section's really short. The middle section's really long. The last section's 28 pages out of 280, 207, 260. I forget the number. But that tells me that really it needs a somewhat longer introduction, the body of the book, and it just needs a conclusion at the end. Like, don't call it 3 parts. I get the editors and production companies kind of want 3-part books. I don't really understand it, other than like it's easier to remember and easy to format that, but don't force it. That's unnecessary. So I really think it needs just the standard intro, body, conclusion. Call it that. Make it a simple 1-chapter thing, not a 2 or 3-chapter thing, and just don't make it weird. So anyway, that aside, this is a fascinating book to me in that it's really telling you not to, like, it's more around the mindset of productivity. It's not necessarily like how to get things done or how to think about it a different way. Like, it's more like, what is your mindset towards yourself when it comes to accomplishing tasks? I don't know of another book like that, like you said. And I specifically don't know of any books that really even attempt to touch that one. I think it's definitely a topic that's broached occasionally inside of some of these other self-help business books that we read, but I can't say that I know of anything that's the focal point. And that's really the focal point here. And I'm grateful for that. I know that I put a lot of guilt and shame on myself with what I don't get done and wish I could get done. And this is definitely a solid book for helping me reframe that and maybe put together, not necessarily a structure, but giving us the freedom to make those decisions and put better expectations on ourselves. That said, I think you nailed it with a 4.5. I think it's worth a higher rating than a 4.0, but I don't see it as 5.0, so 4.5, here we are. I think you should read this. I think pretty much anybody who's touched the world of productivity and understands like task management or anything in that realm, this is definitely for you. I know I say that knowing that I've worked with a lot of people. Like, the concept of task management is like, what is that? Like, what is that? Like, I've got coworkers who think that. So if I gave this to them, it might not make any sense. So I kind of don't know how it would fit in that realm, but I do think this is something that I would recommend to many, many, many people. So please pick it up, Bookworm listeners especially.
All right. Let's put I Didn't Do the Thing Today on the shelf. What's next, Joe?
Up next, we are going to take on the second installment by Shane Parrish and the Farnham Street team with the Great Mental Models. So Volume 2, this is touching on physics, chemistry, and biology. And I think this will be fascinating to see the correlations that come out of those that can apply to the way you think. So this will be fun. It'll be good. I'm kind of excited to get back into mental model stuff. I feel like we've been away from it for too long.
I'm always game to talk about mental models, so I'm glad you picked this one.
All right. What's after that, Mike?
After that is Where Good Ideas Come From by Steven Johnson. Have you heard of this book before?
I have.
Okay. Any
That's
thoughts
as much
on
as
it?
I can tell you about it. I have heard the title. I don't know where I've heard of it, but I have heard of that title before.
All right. Well, Steven Johnson is one of those authors who a lot of the things that he has written have been coming onto my radar recently. And looking at all of the books that he has written, this is the one with the title that most jumped out to me. And this is also the first book of his that was recommended to me. There is a more recent one that just came out called Emergence, which looks interesting too. But I feel like Where Good Ideas Come From is the perfect follow-up to the mental models and this one where we talked a lot about creativity.
Yeah, I don't have any Gap books. I
Okay.
don't.
Yeah, that
Life
was
got crazy in the last week.
That was my question. Do you have any Gap books?
No, do you?
I do not either. I have a whole bunch of books I want to read as Gap books.
Yeah.
However, I'm not confident I'm going to have time to get through those. So I'm not going to commit to one on air.
Okay.
All right.
Sounds good.
Well, thanks everybody for listening. Thanks specifically to the Bookworm Club premium members who chip in a couple of bucks every month to help us keep the lights on. That really helps us a lot. If you want to become a Bookworm Club premium member, you can go to bookworm.fm/membership, $5 a month, $50 a year. What you get for that, in addition to our undying gratitude, is the MindNote files that I create. I export those as PDF files and then also as MindNote files themselves, so people can take my mind maps and create their own versions of them. There's also a couple of Gapbook episodes that Joe created back in the day. There's a 4K bookworm wallpaper. But the big thing is that you are helping us to keep the show running. So thank you very much to everybody who does that.
And if you haven't forgotten, there are bookworm phone cases now.
That's right.
Link in the show notes. You can go do that. Anyway, if you're somebody who's amazing and you read along with us, pick up The Great Mental Models, Volume 2. We'll cover that one with you in a couple of weeks.